partners with Parry Field, specialising in assisting incorporated societies to get underway with their work. All right. And he's done a huge amount of incorporated societies, which he can explain to everybody. And the whole idea is to help be as helpful as he can. And there's a whole pile of question and answers. And so we'll listen to what Steven has to say. He's agreed to join us today. And there is a booklet and various other guides available. But Steven will mention that. I don't know whether you can hear what I'm saying, Steven.
Yes, so Steven, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, that's good.
Well, let's take over.
Okay, and we can hear you well. So you will be able to put up your PowerPoint slides as well.
Okay, perfect. And you can see me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
All right, wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for the chance to join you. I'm based down in Otautahi, Christchurch, so wasn't able to make it in person, but really appreciate the chance to join you virtually. I would love to tell you a little bit about the changes that are coming for incorporated societies. As was said just before, it's something that will affect all incorporated societies, and there's 24,000 of them. 24,000, so that's a lot. And if you think about it, every single one has every single one. Sorry, do you have something to say, Chris?
Oh no, sorry, my apologies.
No, that's okay. So every single one is going to have to re-register, and if you do the maths, 24,000 times 15, and many clubs have many more than 15 members. There's hundreds of thousands of people affected, even though they may not realize it. The officers and the people involved in the clubs are going to have to take some action. So I would love to tell you a little bit about that. I'm going to put some slides up in a second, but just a really brief background. When I start speaking, you hear my accent. I actually moved to New Zealand in 1984. So I've been here a long time. My father had a job here as a marine biologist, helping to raise salmon. So that was why we came in the early 1980s. I went to university at Canterbury University. I worked in Wellington for a while at a big law firm called Russell McVeigh. And I also worked overseas in Tokyo, London, and Sydney. So I kind of had quite a lot of different background and experiences. But when I came back to New Zealand, I really reinvented my career to be focusing on organizations that are about purpose and impact. So getting beyond profit, looking at what other things you're doing. So that's why I've really specialized into charities, incorporated societies, trusts, all of those sorts of things. So that's just the background. So what I'm going to do is just run through a couple slides and just tell you about the changes that are coming. And then you'll feel like, hopefully you're empowered to go back to your clubs, to go back to your groups and talk with the officers, talk with your members, just start getting people on board with where we're at and what's going to be required. I'm happy for the presentation to be sent out afterwards as well. And we've got a whole bunch of guides, videos, FAQs and things on our site. So that will be something that is also available. So you, at the end of this, at least you'll know that there's resources there if you choose to take hold of them. So I'll just share a window here. All right, so can you see that window?
Yep.
Yep, perfect. All right. So the Incorporated Societies Act 2022, what changes results? So just, I always like to have a little bit on the history, just so that you know the context. In 1895, that was the first legislation about what is today an incorporated society. Guess how many, well, I've written it there. Guess how many sections or how many pages? 3 pages, right? 3 pages. The 1908 Act, which is the current act, has 41 sections. So it's a bit bigger. But then the 2022 Act, which is the current one that's just been passed, that has 270 sections. So it's, you know, many pages. So that's kind of where we've come from and where we're going to. Now, before you panic and think, oh no, so many regulations, I have to say that a lot of the sections, a lot of it is probably things that you're already doing. or that you should already be doing. So what it's doing is codifying or putting into words what the common law is. So it's not in statute right now, it's not in the act, but you do need to be complying with it. So don't worry too much that there's so many sections, but it just shows you that there is lots of change. So I mentioned this 24,000 societies, the time frame. So it's not actually in force until October. That's when you can re-register from. So until October, you would, if you wanted to set up a new incorporated society, you would need to do it under the old act, the 1908 Act. But from October, it will all be under the new act, and you'll need to re-register from October. There is this 2.5-year window to re-register. So it's not like you need to hit the red panic button of, oh no, we've got to adopt new rules next week. There is going to be from October 2023 to April 2026. But I think the best practice would be start talking about it now, particularly if you're an incorporated society. And if you're not one, consider should you be one. So that re-registration period will give a bit of a time frame for you to be thinking about. Now, some of you may be going, well, this doesn't apply to me because we're not an incorporated society. And I guess the encouragement I would have on this next slide is some information about why you might want to consider being an incorporated society. So the main reason is that an incorporated society, there's only two words there: incorporated and society. So some of you might be meeting as societies, what's called unincorporated societies. So that's basically, there's no separate legal entity. It's just a group of people gathering together. So the first bullet point there, if you set up an incorporated society, it provides a legal identity which is different to the members. So that's quite important because, as the second bullet says, it provides protection from liability. Because if your club or if your group of people were to have something happen, who would be liable? Well, if you're unincorporated, then actually it's the people, it's the members who are potentially on the hook. Whereas if you have set up a new entity, an incorporated society, that's actually the entity which would then be liable. So this is particularly relevant when it comes to entering into contracts or potentially into leasing some space. So let's say that your club wanted to have a gathering point and you wanted to lease an area, you know, like a factory or something where you could take cars in and there could be a place, a gathering point. Well, if you're not an incorporated society, who would sign the lease? It would have to be individuals, and those individuals would be liable for the lease. So hopefully this is kind of obvious, but when you're entering into contracts, it's better if it's not you. I would feel more comfortable if it's not Steven Moe signing up to a contract, and instead it's the incorporated society that, yes, I'm a member of, but that's different from me as a person. So I just thought it was important to mention that because I know some of you may not be incorporated societies and you're thinking, it doesn't apply to us. But actually, I would challenge and say, maybe you should consider becoming an incorporated society. It also enables working with other groups. And the way that you would go about doing this is you fill in an application form. You need to have a certain number of people who are members. Right now, it's 15 people that are required. But in the future, after October, it will be 10 people. So you need to adopt rules. There's an application to fill in. You get more than 15 people or more than 10 people to sign, and then you submit and you get incorporated. So I think maybe after I speak, one of your someone may want to tell a war story of experiences, what they've seen going on. Chris, is that right? Should I keep going and then someone can share afterwards, or do you want to have
That's right. Yeah. So Tony will swing on in along with David from the financial aspects, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll just run through now. There's so having talked to those who are not incorporated societies, There are other options. Like I view it, since the nature of what you do, I view it as being legal vehicles, like different types of cars. So you wouldn't get in a four-wheel drive if you have, 8 children, but you would get a people mover if you needed to move a lot of children from place to place. It's the same with legal structures. When you're considering what's the best legal structure, you need to think, what's our purpose? What's our impact? And then you choose, oh, incorporated society is the best, or charitable trust, or company, or some other type. But in your context, where you're volunteer member led, incorporated societies are usually quite a good vehicle to be opening the door of and driving into the future. So that's just about incorporated societies. Now, the changes that are coming, I've put the little graphic there on the right-hand side. So this is just a free guide that we've put on our information hub. So you're welcome. If anybody'd like a copy, I can just email it to you. And I think most of the people involved in organizing this will have an email copy. So I'm happy for that just to be shared. I just want the information to be out there so that people can make informed decisions. So just really, I'm not going to go into the detail here because it's all in this guide. The first thing is, though, new rules will be required because the Act has different things that are needed. So even if you have rules that were adopted in the last year or 2 years, I can guarantee you that there will be at least 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 things that have changed in the new Act that mean you'll need to adopt a new set of rules. Number 2, a committee will be required. In the past, it was a bit unclear as to how this worked and who was on committees and wasn't, so they've clarified a lot of that. Number 3, officers' duties are clearly set out. So it's not like you didn't have officers' duties before. It's just now they're clearly articulated about what you need to do and who is responsible for doing things. Number 4, there's some changes when it comes to membership. So it basically, you need to set out who can be a member and how they join. And so there's new rules about that as well. There's also conflict of interest procedures, which are required now. So that's actually quite helpful because sometimes in a meeting, there might have been officers who, they run a catering business and there's a decision made that their company will be used to provide the food for this upcoming event. That's a conflict. So they need to be declaring it. And so the rules now are much clearer about what to do. So I think they're helpful because it informs people. There's also requirements for dispute resolution procedures. If you don't have them in your rules, then the Act will prevail, but you can choose what you want it to say. So there's a lot of flexibility for your clubs to choose what is appropriate for your situation. There's rules about financial reporting. If any of you have less than 50,000 per year, then you're what's called a small society. So that's good because you'll have less reporting requirements, but otherwise there's rules about what you need to report and when. I think when you come to the financial report, somebody may be sharing about that as well. And then there's rules about amalgamation. So amalgamation is 2 groups coming together to join. Right now, it's not provided for in the Act, but in the new Act, there will be a simple procedure. So if you said, well, actually, there's 2 clubs doing very similar things in the same place, why don't we pool our resources together? So that will be a lot easier in the future. So I think my encouragement to you is actually, this is a moment in time which will not come again because you have to re-register. That should be a chance for you to do a bit of a health check on your rules and say, what's this rule? We never do that. Why is it there? Get rid of it. Make your rules bespoke and have them fit what you do so that going forward, it will be easy and clear. And I think you could view this as overreaching from government and more regulation, but I prefer to think of it as a glass half full situation where actually, let's look in the mirror, let's have a think about this. And like I said, for some of you who are not incorporated societies, hey, maybe this is the moment to say, why aren't we? Should we be? Because I can guarantee you it will reduce your liability. And so there's a lot of protection that comes from doing that. So those were the some key changes to be aware of. Obviously, I didn't want to use up all the time going into the detail, but the guide has all of them. And it also has 50 frequently asked questions. So this resource here is the information hub that we've put together. We actually have more than 100 questions because we've been running online free Zoom sessions for people. And we've compiled every question we've got with all the answers. We've also put up about 7 different videos explaining the changes. And we've also put up about 12 articles talking about all of the implications. So I think that's how you all originally found me, is through Google, the power of Google. And I think it's probably accurate to say that we've put out probably the most information from a law firm about all the changes that are coming. So that's the presentation. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm also happy to have someone in the room share a bit more, and then maybe we can go to questions. Thanks very much for the chance to talk, though. I really appreciate it.
Stephen, thank you very much. We'll continue the moment with David, etc. But can I just ask a technical question? Would your company be prepared to do a webinar for our members to join in on at some stage as we approach close to the time, I guess, when these things start to become a little more urgent, and perhaps as we get to the season of annual general meetings?
Yeah, that's fine. If we, it'd be good to coordinate it so that everyone knew in advance, and then, set a date. But yeah, that would be no problem. We've done almost 20 webinars now, which are just open to the public. So we run those every month. So if somebody wanted to, they're welcome to join those as well. But yeah, I could do a specific one for you. It's no problem at all.
That'd be great. How many people do you think a webinar usually works well at? Is it like 50 max or 30 max or 200? Where do you get to?
Well, I view it, the power of technology is that, you can potentially have, I've done them for 20 people, for 70 people, for 120 people, because what I do, hopefully you get a sense of my style of presenting, is that I ask for people to put their questions in the chat, and then I can just answer them as we're talking and just keep it very fluid and organic. So it's up to you. I'm happy to be guided by you, actually, as to how you want to offer it.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll take you up on that offer, I'm sure. Tony, David, we're in your hands.
So first of all,
Tony, can I perhaps suggest that you come down here? That way you'll be able to talk to Stephen. So, or you can just talk up there, whichever suits. Yeah, okay.
So thank you, Stephen, for that. It was a nice day when I first contacted you, and that was via finding you online and appreciating immediately your response and getting Sophie to send out the handbook. That was lovely. And I've got your handbook here, and I've already put a lot of pencil notes in here where it applies to us. And that was excellent. You confirmed with Parry that we can run webinars with the common interest being our motoring clubs, and they will go down and we'll learn something from those. All right. You put out, as you say, various publications, and one of them I think is headed up the 10 main changes, or the 10 main sections that we have to address. And one of them I've become aware of is that for the disciplinary procedures, you have to obviously measure discipline against what you consider to be a fair behaviour, fair and sensible and reasonable behaviour. Before you can discipline somebody, you've got to have a degree of measure of whether they're stepping out of line. Now, I've got the benefit, I'm in the Vintage Car Club, and the president of the time, this is going back many years now, asked me to, says, I'm going overseas, can you do the disciplinary procedures for us? And I spent a lot of time on that, and then following that, it became clear that we needed a code of conduct. Now, both of those things for the Vintage Car Club are in place, and to me, they could form the basis of a template, so to speak, that is probably in line with a lot of what these clubs would consider things to have in a code of conduct, things that relate to motoring kind of activities and behaviours. So there's one thing, of course. So, but the reason that we're looking to you is because you're able to give legal advice in a different context altogether to us. And we're looking to guide our clubs in any way we can. So, and that's still the case. All right, we're making it clear to our clubs that we're trying to facilitate this. We don't want them to be to shy away. You and I have had a discussion about trusts and charitable trusts, and we don't believe that we want to go down that line. There are certain obligations on the office holders of trusts, and in fact, there are certain obligations on the officers now with incorporated societies. But you could perhaps explain a bit more of that about not being able to be a bankrupt or et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to the finance, I'll hand over to David here, who will talk about that. Or do you want to take questions as they come right now?
Well, I can't really see the room, so I don't know. Is there like dozens of hands raised? I'm happy to take questions at any point. As to your comment there, I can address that one, which is the reality is if you're an officer of an incorporated society or a trustee of a trust, you will have duties. And I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just a voluntary thing, so nothing, I'll never be responsible. But actually, whatever entity type you have, there is liability potentially. That's why you have things like you just mentioned, good policies in place, natural justice is being seen. So yeah, it's a bit of a tension. There's no legal structure though that will say, oh, you're not liable at all, just get on with doing whatever you do. So yeah.
I just did the math, and from woe to go, for 24,000 incorporated societies, it's roughly 40 per day are going to have to be approved. Do you think that MB has got themselves up to speed sufficiently that there's not going to be a 10,000 backlog at the end of it, and the whole thing's going to have to be jigged around?
That's a great question. Great comment. I honestly don't know. I have a feeling, not being cynical at all about government, but sometimes they have plans that don't match the reality of what is capable, in terms of the number of people. But there are provisions within the rules. So basically, if you have submitted your application before the cutoff date, you're going to be fine. I don't think they're going to say, oh, well, we at our end weren't able to process it by the date that we'd said. As long as you've submitted it in time, I think it's going to be fine. And between me and everyone in the room there, I'm pretty sure that when they get closer to October 2026, April 2026, they're probably going to say we're extending 3 months or 6 months or something like that. Because as we know, 24,000, the vast majority of them don't have the resources to even be aware that something's happening. So it's going to hit a whole bunch of clubs and groups that aren't as sophisticated. You're great because you have a national body who's actually looking after all of the others underneath. But imagine all the ones where there's no entity like yours that's saying, hey, something's coming. They just have no idea. So yeah.
Steven Moe here. I'm president of one club that's not a incorporated society, and I'm a office holder in another club that is an incorporated society, and both clubs are members of the FoMC. The unincorporated club has taken out an insurance policy with through the FoMC, which protects the office holders against suing and fraud and those sorts of things. So how would you sell me the becoming an incorporated society in the club that's not an incorporated society when we have approximately 250 members? We meet once a year. We don't hire any premises. We do meet once a year. Why should we become an incorporated society?
Well, if you're not entering into any contracts ever, and you're not leasing anything ever, and you're simply a gathering of individuals, then maybe it won't be necessary for you. But I think someone there is going to share a story of something that they had seen about an event where it actually became a bit, complicated because one group was incorporated and the other wasn't. From my personal perspective, so as a lawyer, as you know, lawyers are risk averse. So if there's ever any way to ring fence liability and say liability is contained within this entity rather than potentially flowing to the individuals involved, then I would always go, well, there's not really any cost involved in this. Let's go to formalize it and actually set up as a legal entity. But of course, you have to bear in mind, as a lawyer, I'm always looking at how to mitigate and reduce the risk. I haven't reviewed the insurance policies and seen what's covered and what isn't either. So, but that's a very good thing to have in place as well.
Hi, I just want to ask, I do know some organisations and clubs have already done their constitutions, made the changes, submitted them and been approved. Are they going to have to resubmit them in October, or will that carry over?
They'll have to resubmit them in October. You can't re-register yet. It has to be from October. So they may have adopted new rules in the last couple months or something, but there will be a process to be followed in October. Perhaps if they've gotten some good advice and their rules are up to date and it's considered what the new act requires, maybe they won't have to make any changes, but there will be a re-registration process that they need to follow through with.
They only just a couple of months submitted it to the Incorporated Society, paid the money and got signed off. But are they still going to have to
Yeah, they'll have to re-register all 24,000. You can't re-register right now. It's impossible. I've asked them. And the other thing is that I said to them, what if, I had a new incorporated society and I said, well, could we apply under the new rules? And they said, no, it only is from October this year. So I'm happy to send you to the website, and even I can give you the contact details for the MB people if you want to put them in touch with the people. But I've talked with them many times and they've said it's from October this year that you can re-register. So the new club that just got granted the Incorporated Society status in May of this year, it's just like another club. They'll have to re-register. Hopefully, when I'm talking about re-registration, I haven't seen the form, but hopefully it's just a simple form that they need to fill in and someone will sign it and submit it with the rules.
And just to follow through on that, just like we sent out newsletters during COVID, we're going to do the same thing for incorporated societies, where that is a dedicated newsletter, and in that will be the various resources that Stephen's referring to, plus some example templates and some guidelines for club members to follow. And we'll provide, as Tony said, some sample templates. So it would be a constitution updates. For those that were at the AGM last year, we actually tested it on ourselves. So it would have a particular topic or clause, changing it from blah to blah, and the most important part of it is the rationale on why it's being changed. The other thing also is that because a number of clubs are going to need to make substantial changes, there could just be one motion at the AGM, which just simply says replace all of the existing constitution with the new constitution, and just make it simple like that.
Right, David.
Yes, thank you. Stephen was talking about, I think he said war stories. And I mentioned one to him when we were having the conference call or the video conference about this. And this was a situation where in the Rover Club, 2 different branches rented a batch for, book a batch for Bricks at the Beach. Now, one of the branches, the one I'm in, is an incorporated society with full insurance. And the other branch isn't an incorporated society and didn't have insurance. And we got discussing, and they said, well, why would we be an incorporated society? And I said, well, let's say the barbecue that we always used to hold on a Saturday night and invite all the club members to got out of hand and we burnt the batch down. What would happen then? And the answer was that me, as a member of an incorporated society, would have a certain amount of coverage, and we would just talk to the insurer and say, sort it out. And that cost us as a club $5 a year per member. And I slept very peacefully at night knowing that I got that insurance in my back pocket. And the other club said, well, what would happen was, well, they'd come after you as individual members, basically. You would be responsible for half the value of the batch. They went, yeah, but their insurance would cover it, surely. It's like, well, do you want to take that risk? So that was why I'm happy to be a member of an incorporated society. And I think I would be very unsure about being a officer of a club that wasn't an incorporated society, just because the insurance that it gives you. We'll talk about finance now, if Chris can put it up on the screen.
Yep. So
Stephen basically passes over to a financial advisor for the financial side of it. I don't know whether I've got permission to give her name out, but I will be discussing it with her over the next few weeks, and I'll put the details out in the newsletter or the review that Chris is going to be sending out. Now, there's various tiers involved of society, and the guidelines were only agreed upon on the 24th of May, so it's only just been agreed by MD on where you fall. So there are 5 levels.
yeah, I'm just trying to grab it. Do you remember the full name? Apologies for this.
FoMC accreditation.
Yep.
Just while Chris is finding it, a few years ago, our own constitution on the federation said our financials had to be audited, and that was relatively easy for up until about 4 or 5 years ago, when I believe the accounting society changed what they needed to do. And as a result, we suddenly went from, oh, your audit's going to cost you $300 a year to your audit's probably going to cost you $1,800 per year. So as a result, we actually altered our constitution from audited to reviewed. And that meant that we could just have them reviewed by a financial advisor. And that was acceptable, but we may now need to look at possibly changing that back based on new tiers, and we'll need to get financial advice on that as well.
Okay, I've found it. I'll just pop it up onto screen, just so that so I just need to go right up to the top there. Actually, I just need to zip around here because I can't see that.
Oh, sorry.
So share. And screen is that one. Okay, and then
there was quite a lot of information given to me as in terms of what we needed to do on the financial side of it. And because I'm an engineer by training rather than a financial advisor, I basically tried to distill it out in a way that I understood. Just so that I knew what basically we could tell you guys today.
And I've just got to use this other screen. Yes, where are you? Up there it is.
David, my understanding is that at the present time, providing a club doesn't in any 1 year of operation go beyond the threshold for review, that they're okay. But in any year, they might run a national event or sell an asset that puts them in another threshold. They'll definitely require an audit in that particular year. Is that?
It's my understanding of it. So while Chris is looking for it, there are 5.
Here it is here. The only thing is it's doing the same thing as it was this morning, where it's sharing on this screen. David, can I suggest that you probably come over here and just talk to it? You don't need the mic. You've got there's a mic on here already.
Okay, there are 5 tiers. So tiers 1 through to 4 will need external reporting board financial requirements. Tier 1, I'll concentrate just on tier 4, tier 3 and tier 4, I think, because tier 1 is like you're a public accountability and you've got total expenses greater than $30 million a year, which I don't think we need to worry about.
Which clubs hand?
So tier 3 has no public accountability and has total expenses below $2 million a year. So you need external reporting board finances. Tier 4 has no public accountability and has total expenses of less than $140,000 in the last 2 accounting periods. Again, external reporting board required. You then become a small incorporated society. So you've got total operating payments of less than $50,000 a year. At balance date, current assets are less than $50,000 a year. And you are not a charitable organisation, and all of the above must apply.
Current assets of $50,000, not per year, full stop.
Current assets of $50,000 per year. The income and expenditure, receipts and payments must be shown during the accounting period, assets and liabilities of the society at the close of the accounting period, and all mortgages, charges and other security interests of any description affecting any of the property of the society. Close of the accounting period. So you do have to do finances, but they're nowhere near as onerous as they are in tier 4.
Is this tier 5 you're talking about?
Well, it's called a small incorporated society, not a tier 4. So you've got tier 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then you've got a small incorporated society. So a small incorporated society is less than $50,000 a year.
We'll include all of this into the newsletters that go out. Yep.
And in terms of what's required, so if you've got buildings, for instance, you don't need to include buildings unless you're going to sell them in the next financial year. Same with spares. You don't need to include your spares value, but you do need to include any income you derive from selling spares. The key one as well for a lot of clubs is if you hold a national rally, any costs incurred have to be classed as income. So if you collect money for food, accommodation, anything like that, even though the money's basically going straight through your organisation and straight back out again to pay third-party suppliers, they still need to be considered. So that's basically our understanding at the moment. We'll carry on confirming it with the independent financial people, and we're going to include this in the handout that Chris will be supplying for incorporated societies.
But I didn't quite get at tier 4.
Yep.
Have to be audited.
Yes, tier 4 says external reporting board finances must apply.
But that doesn't. So there's a differentiation between having it audited and having it reviewed by a registered financial provider, is there not?
There is. I understand. I don't know.
Basically, an audit is different from a review. The review is not an external one. That's a lower level one. From what it says there, tier 4, 1 and 3 and that all require an audit.
It says external reporting board accountancy practices must apply. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't know what that means. So I can't basically give.
You don't mean.
Steve,
Steve, can you?
Do you want me to say something there?
Yes, would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically the external reporting board is the government entity that sets the financial standards for charities and not-for-profits in New Zealand. And they, as you're saying, they have the 4 different tiers. And then there's different specifications about what you need to do for each of them. I know I'm a lawyer, but I sit on the XRB's external advisory panel. So I've gotten to know them quite well. And they have a lot of guidance on their website. So I'm not going to stray into giving you accounting advice because that would be dangerous. But I think if you're interested in that, there is a lot of resources that the XRB is producing about what you need to do to comply. I hope that's helpful.
I think what would be useful is perhaps if we put a link to that advice in the information we put out.
Yeah, so on the website, we have a dedicated trade directory section. So if the executive following today's meeting approve at our next meeting next month, we'll actually pop a link through to Parry Field, and you can talk to Parry, to Stephen and his team directly. Stephen, I think also it's worth noting that when we were doing the research for this presentation, you made a comment about why don't I go to my local lawyer in Whangamata? Do you want to make a comment on that one?
Sure. It's totally self-serving, but if you go to a doctor and you've got a problem with your eye, you probably don't want to go to someone who's a specialist in knee problems. And equally, if you have a knee problem, you don't really want to talk to a doctor who's a specialist in eyes. And so my focus is really on for-purpose organizations and helping incorporated societies. So, you know, this is what I do day in, day out. In the last year, we've helped set up 40 or 50 different charities. Just, you know, that's slightly different, but it shows the experience. So yeah, we're very happy to have conversations. The other thing is that I have a little commute. I live in Rolleston, so I'm in Christchurch, but live in Rolleston. So it's about a 20-minute commute every day. So quite often, if somebody wants to just have a little brainstorm, you know, some of the questions you were asking there, I'm very happy to just have a quick call, you know, run through my understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then if I can help, you know, with more detailed reviews of your rules, for example, or helping you with re-registration or helping you apply to become an incorporated society, then that's fine. But I'm happy to do that on a just free basis, have a 20-minute chat and work it out. And then we also do lots of other things as well. So, you know, if there's disputes, if there's property, we've got 80 people in our firm. So we do all of those things as well. Thanks for the chance to mention that.
Stephen, thank you. I take it that you've got a hands-free kit in your car, or are you going by train?
I do. Yep, it's all hands-free. Maybe one day it'll be AI guided or something, right?
Yeah.
And on the financial aspects of it, which David is the lead, we've established a relationship with a recommended accountant who's a specialist in this field as well. Is that correct, David? Or
no, she figures the recommendations board, and she pointed out she's not actually a registered accountant in that area. So,
but she was able to recommend.
She was able to recommend it.
Yes.
Putting out recommendations.
Yeah. Are we at the end?
Yep.
Any further questions for Stephen while we have the very good fortune to have him with us?
But to clarify, small organisations, the way we see it, you only need a review.
For a
So
small
if
organisation?
you're under the 50K, you only need to review.
I think that's probably the case. Is that correct, Stephen?
Yeah. The requirements are much reduced. Yes, that's right. There's still something you have to do, but nowhere near as the bigger tier charities or not-for-profits.
Is it also correct that there's going to be some further refinement of the legislation or the acts regarding the financial aspects?
Yeah, I think that they're always going to keep refining it. There actually potentially are other regulations. Someone was asking about, will we need to re-register from October? The reason that they haven't opened it up is that they still haven't come out with all the final form of regulations that will apply. So it's possible there will be some things that we don't know yet. But I think we're getting a pretty good shape of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty much to be expected when legislation is 115 years old and it's replaced. There will be some adjustments to be made as experience shows where the glitches are. I guess you've come across that in many other situations, Stephen.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, because the legislation is so old, I've been helping some which were written, 70 years ago, 80 years ago. So it's incredible. It's actually it's almost like a historical adventure because they're all typewritten, this wasn't done on computer back in 1937 or 1952. So it's interesting. But this is my encouragement as well to all of you. Have a read of your rules. When was the last time you got them out, dusted them off? And there will be things in there which you go, why on earth do we have that written down? We have never done that. So I view it as an opportunity. And the other thing, maybe a closing comment is this an opportunity to reinvigorate your club and to actually get more people involved and to take them on the journey of what's going on and why do we exist? What's our purpose? Let's be really clear about it. Let's adopt the new rules, and maybe at the same time we should revisit our logo or how we're communicating our messaging. Like maybe this is an opportunity that if you view it that way, it could be a new growth period for your club rather than feeling like, oh no, there's more admin to be done. So yeah.
If there are no more questions, there appear to be none. Stephen, thank you very much for making yourself available on Sunday. We know you have small children, and we really appreciate the fact that you've been able to give us your time and guidance for the future. So we look forward to continuing our association. So thank you very much indeed. What about a round of applause? Have a nice afternoon down in the deep south. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Right. It's moving along. Probably should jump up and move around for a bit to free up. But